Welcome, everybody, to the 2021 DC Black Film Festival, Year 5. I'm founder and festival director Kevin Sampson, and I am honored that you would join us this evening or whatever time it is, because you might be on another coast from wherever you are in the world. I love to do this. Make sure you rep whatever city or country you are in the chat. And please, during our conversation, you can ask questions to our panel of distinguished guests, and they'll try to get to them. We may have an opportunity for you to actually come up on stage to pose your question as well. Make sure you check out dcbff.org for more information about our festival, our lineup of events and films. You can cop a t-shirt or a mug at the store while you're over there. I'm super excited about this conversation as I get to talk with an old friend and mentor and a new friend that I feel like I've known forever about a part of the craft that I actually don't know as well. In fact, the one thing I do know well is that sound is 50% of film, and when done well, you don't notice it. But when done poorly, it automatically will make my wife say, "Are we watching a student film?" I'd like to introduce my guest, Russell Williams. Real quick, I'm going to bring Russell up. Reading his bio, Russell Williams was born on October blankety blank in Washington, District of Columbia. He's known for his work on Dances with Wolves and Glory and The Negotiator. He is the first African-American to receive multiple Academy Awards in any category, winning back-to-back Oscars for Glory in 1989 and Dances with Wolves in 1990. If trivia serves me correctly, as of 2019, Russell, sound mixer Willie D. Burton, and actors Denzel Washington and Mahershala Ali are the only 4 African Americans that have won 2 Oscars. So let's give this man his flowers. Russell Williams, welcome to the chat.
Kevin, very happy to be here on the 5th anniversary of DC BFF. I want to let your viewers know that Kevin doesn't only give, but he gives back. He's been hosting several of my classes at American U, between Executive Suite and even I think one of my weekend courses, because anytime I need somebody to wax eloquently about the festival circuit, to tell students and even, independents that aren't necessarily in the school that just because you had an idea and you photographed it doesn't necessarily mean you have something that's festival ready. It can be, but let's look at what the festival programmers are going to do when they see it, and then let's see how you can, prepare yourself to try to forestall the word that no one wants to hear as long as possible, and that's no. All right. And so how do you do that? What's the length? How does it sound? How does it look? What's the subject matter? So Kevin is the expert that I call on, because even though I've been to festivals, being on the other side of it, how you put it together, how you organize it, how you curate it, don't call me. Just call me when screenings are starting and where am I sitting. So Kevin, glad to be here, sir.
Oh, man, I appreciate it. Now, we also have on the bill Marlowe Taylor. Marlowe is currently working on Fear the Walking Dead. So Marlowe is definitely going to join us. We'll see once he comes on. I'll just pull him up. But until then, Russell and I, we just get to chop it up. Now, the thing about our relationship, I first met Russell at American University when I was getting my graduate degree. And as I've told you before, brother, you were half the reason that I decided to go to American University. I just straight up, I love documentaries, and documentary filmmaking is what I had done prior. And my wife was just like, you got to go back to school. not in a mean way, but my stuff just wasn't all the way together. And so we were up in the DC area. I looked at American. I saw, okay, they do film as well as documentary. And then I saw this brother with 2 Oscars on the website, and I said, I gotta sit at his feet. So we're in for a treat tonight. Definitely talking with you, Russell. First question: when did you first fall in love with sound?
Well, Kevin, that would have been, I would say let's keep it in the cinematic realm. I know that happened by the time I was 7 years old. I had been listening to music prior to that. I didn't decide to actually take, say, piano lessons until I was 9 or 10. But at 7, and I'm going to go on and betray my age because I'm proud of it, of being an old fool. You don't get to be old unless you're a real fool. Was this film called Ben-Hur, the
Oh,
1959 Ben-Hur with Charlton Heston, and the score was written by a gentleman named Miklos Rosa. And by this time, I'd heard some orchestral music, I'd heard some jazz, I'd heard some blues, and of course, in the church, we'd heard gospel and spirituals. In my day, it was more spirituals than gospel. And the overture that starts the movie in black. Well, actually, it's not in black. It has a graphic up there, and it's these massive horns and these lovely themes that go up and down. And I told my mom, I said, "Now I'm not sure what this movie's about, but it sounds like it's going to be really important." And of course, on the one sheet it said A Tale of Christ, but I'd already forgotten that by the time we sat down. So from there, cut forward from music lessons, falling in love with music on the reel, playing live music. By the time I got to American U as an undergrad, one of the things that I ended up doing was with another AU student, we created a radio program called Spirits Known and Unknown. And it was jazz, blues, R&B, a little public affairs, a little news. And initially it was just the two of us, and it expanded out to become a radio workshop. But long story short, that was my first real contact with professional audio gear. So real microphones, I mean, like Shure, Electro Voice, Neumann, real tape recorders like Ampex, Scully, real turntables, Gates, Techniques, that kind of stuff. And so you learned how to address the microphone. You had really expensive headphones. You actually then had to go out on the street from time to time to record people in the real world. And when you come back, you hear the background noise and the traffic. And sometimes that adds to the story. Sometimes it detracts from the story. And then as I went through the film classes, of course, everybody wanted to be a camera person if you were working behind, but no one wanted to do sound. And so it was automatic. Well, sure, I'll do the sound. Well, it's not like I even have to learn that much about what does what. And then as I got to real work, Channel 4 there, Channel 7 in DC, which actually still had a film documentary unit, that really prepared me for what I was going to do later in life, because we would go out on the street, shoot footage, come back to the station, edit it, process the sound, process the film, put it together. And then I would get immediate feedback as to whether what I did in the street was going to work or not. Or, could I place that mic someplace else? Or could we have moved around the corner and use that wall to kind of block off some of the, all these little things help you become what we call a critical listener. And so that's the thing that I'm hoping that Marlowe and I can get across to the filmmakers. Is a lot of people have visual acuity in this industry, but unfortunately, they just think that listening the way a human being listens is enough to evaluate whether the sound that you're hearing on a location, or even sometimes coming out of the speakers, is going to work, because the microphone does this job a little differently than our brain and ears. Our brain and ears actually work better than most microphones. So when I got to LA, my master plan was to call action and cut. But the same pile of mail that said no thank you from AFI, I got a really large tax return from the IRS. And I said, well, there's more than one way to get to Los Angeles. So I decided I would go out there and just work on my sound, gig. And then, at some point, maybe cross over and get a DGA card. All right. And last little note, it was funny a couple years ago when Eddie Murphy did the movie about Rudy Ray Moore, because literally in July of 1979, the first person I worked with in LA was Rudy Ray Moore, doing pickup shots for this movie he was doing called Disco Godfather.
Oh,
and,
wow.
and so I was saying, I moved cross country to do this, but every career has a first rung.
Right.
And regardless of what I had done in DC, I'd worked Watergate hearings, I'd worked some impressive documentaries and all of that. That was in DC. I'm in Los Angeles now, where, these sound stages were almost as big as my whole neighborhood. So it's like, back at square one, and pay attention, because you got to pay a new set of dues.
Man, that is absolutely crazy. I know Marlowe is right now. He's on live with us. I know he's trying to get in. So Marlowe, we'll definitely talk to you in a second. But yeah, Russell, in case folks don't know, like, I could just go down, some of the films that you've made, whether or been on with Glory, Field of Dreams, Dancing with Wolves, Jungle Fever, Boomerang, Mo Money, Baps is in there, which you have a great story about that. 12 Angry Men, the TV show, The Negotiator is like one of my favorites. So you definitely have done a plethora of not only films, but like good films. And so one of the things that I think filmmakers really want to know is, how do you walk into a room or that location that you're going to be on and listen and know if it's a good place to be?
Excellent question, Kevin. And I wish that, and I'm hoping that the filmmakers that are listening, and I'm hoping that from the title Sound Decisions, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're only interested in talking to people who do sound. We're really trying to reach producers, directors, even writers, and strangely enough, even actors, because when we're working on location, those four individuals or groups of individuals have more of an effect on the final product of sound than we do just riding the gain and putting the microphones in the right place. Okay. And so what typically doesn't happen, and it's not doesn't happen on student films, it doesn't happen on small independent films, it rarely happens on big multi-million-dollar films, is that not only the sound mixer or someone who listens for a living is invited to what we call the preliminary scouts. So are we going to use this kitchen? Are we going to use the one over at Universal's back lot? Are we going to use the one that's over in Westchester, if you know the LA area, which Westchester means LAX, right? So they would never consider doing a preliminary scout without a camera person.
Right.
Okay. Now, in most cases, we are all talking about people who can see. So why do you need the camera person to come and see the location? Well, apparently there's some other decisions that need to be made, like what direction is the light coming from, what color are the walls, what color temperatures are we possibly going to have to mix and add, and where's the Jenny going to go if we need one, et cetera, et cetera. But very few directors and producers assume that they can also make decisions about sound just because they can hear, without bringing a sound professional. So the short answer is this: when you go to a location, there are a few things you need to have in mind right off the top. How many pages of scripted dialogue are going to take place in this set, based on what you know at that point in pre-production? Or if this is a documentary, is this going to be an office where you're going to interview the principal? Or is this this a spot that something important happened in the principal's life that you want to be in the real spot? Now, tell everybody to shut up, just like with room tone. And okay, so now let's listen and let's take notice of what time of day it is. So do we hear the refrigerators? Are we hearing kids playing at the elementary school across the street? Are the acoustics in the room making it more like echoey and going to be potentially more difficult to get clean dialogue? Okay, so I call that zone one. Wherever the camera is going to be placed, anything within that perimeter, and that perimeter doesn't have a specific distance, it's just whatever zone one is. When you do a 360, are there any sound problems inherent right there, including the camera itself? Because the cameras itself, not even my old film cameras, but the digital cameras sometimes have blowers in them, which could create a sound problem right there. Zone two would be right outside that set, out to how far you have production control. So what does that mean? How far away do you have people with walkie-talkies that can maybe just trot over and say, "Oh, ma'am, do you mind if we hold you just a minute before you turn on that lawnmower, or before you do X, Y, Z, because we're trying to get a scene here," right? And if they can't, they can't. If the location, if you're not on the show where you can pay them off, because that's the LA thing, pay these people some money to keep them quiet. Okay. So, but that's zone 2. Now that zone 2 may be just within the base camp on a lot. It could be within the street you're shooting. It could be 2 or 3 blocks. How far away your walkie-talkie control is, at zone 2. Okay. Zone 3 is the rest of the world, which of course you'll have no control on. So my calculus basically means you need to have 2 out of the 3 places that you have good control. It doesn't absolutely have to be absolute control, but you have to have good enough control to know that when we get this key dialogue or this interview, that you're not going to be stopped every 2 minutes by planes or heavy traffic going up and down the street. And it's easier to do sometimes on a scripted project, because if you have enough money to reroute bus routes, which we've done in features, and maybe because we see this as in a period piece. If this is the 1930s, then obviously you can't have 21st century vehicles going up and down the street. So we will have street lockdown. But if it's a present day project, it's going to be a little bit harder to control traffic. But say you have 1 and 2 under control, but in zone 3, again, you're in Westchester or you're in Inglewood, where I am right now. And if we were outside, you'd be hearing Delta, Southwest, Spirit, you know what I'm saying? Korea Air flying right over my head all day long.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So, and I can't tell you how many times I've been to a location at the Tech Scout. Now that's the traditional place where they bring the sound person. Okay, so they've already decided this place. They've already spent money. They've already painted it. They've already brought the furniture in. Now I come in, or Marlowe comes in, and it says, yeah, but we hear this, and how am I supposed to deal with that? And we can't turn this off, and this is a problem, and that's a problem. So now we're the jerks. Now we're the bad guys.
Right.
Because all these other people have come in, it's fine for them, but what? They're looking at something visual. No one has come to listen to this set. And I'll tell you on the record right now before I shut up, it's much harder to get good sound than it is to get good picture. I'll flip it around the other way. It's much easier to get good picture than it is to get good sound, which doesn't say it's easy to get good picture, right?
Yeah.
But here's the reason why. With picture, you can see your problems. A lot of my problems, a lot of Marlowe's problems, when we're on set, they're invisible. Like, okay, yeah, I hear it, but where is it coming from? But the camera person can look down and say, yeah, let's see, 15th car, left side of the street, there's a glare on that windshield. I need to send a grip down there to spray that down, and we're ready. You know what I'm saying? Or we've got a flicker on HMI number 4 over there. Go over and change out that ballast. But a lot of our problems are invisible.
Okay.
Sorry.
Man, no. These are nuggets right here. And for our audience that's live on Crowdcast, use the Ask a Question tab so that you can ask a question. I'll bring you up on stage. If you're on Facebook, shout out to my brother. I see he said this man is dropping gems. So yeah, again, Russell, I just appreciate you're doing that. Obviously, 2-time Oscar and Emmy winner. One of the things that I wanted to do is I wanted to show a clip from one of my favorite movies. And the reason I do this at any time, and because just like you said, I give back, you give back, you come to my classes as well to talk sound, which has been amazing. But when I was a little bit younger, I think that might have been in high school when Training Day came out. I remember specifically one, Denzel Washington was like, and still is like my favorite actor in the whole world. But he killed this role. But there was a moment in the film in which I particularly listened to the sound and I said to myself, oh my goodness, how did they record that? And little did I know that one day I would be talking to the man that actually recorded it. So I'm going to share this clip. Give me 1 second so I can make sure everybody can hear it. All right, here we go.
Pay the bill. And grab that menu off that window. Right. Get in, it's unlocked. Just throw that in the glove box.
This car is not from the motor pool.
No, it's not. Sexy though, isn't it?
So where's the office back at the Division?
You're in the office, baby. Going up. Today's a training day, Officer Hoyt. Show you around, give you a taste of the business, you know?
All right. Now, obviously, my little speakers ain't gonna do that part justice. But again, when you hear that in surround, and you're sitting there in the theater, and you just hear the engine revving, you hear Denzel, his delivery. It's incredible. So if you could just walk us through, how did you record that? There's so much that we hear in that scene that you don't really think about, but we hear the footsteps walking across as they walk out of the diner. We hear the keys rustling. We hear the car doors opening when they get in. It's almost like you can hear the leather from the jackets. How did you all record that?
Okay, so one of the things that I hope our viewers and listeners appreciate is that anything in a movie, television show, documentary, even if the location sound is pristine and perfect, it's always going to be augmented and massaged in post-production. So at my level, once Denzel and Ethan walk out of the diner, they're being tracked by our boom person, right? And because they don't really do a wide split between them, it's basically one boom person that's covering the little bit of dialogue right at the diner, and then once they cross the street, which we own. So that's a perfect example of what I was talking about earlier. We own the traffic on that street, so no car would come and run over Ethan or Denzel while we're in the middle of that shot. Those cars are basically, even though there's a, what do they call, a universal pedestrian law in Los Angeles, it still depends on the driver to put on the brake. So those drivers there were getting paid to stop to let the cast go through. Once they get to the car side of the street, still over the head is a boom. Chit chat, key in the door, so forth and so on. They get in the car. Before any of those picture cars got to set, we got a chance to, and we had 4 different Chevy Malibus, but each one of those cars was rigged for sound. In other words, we had microphone inputs already in the car. They were already pre-wired. So now the question was, do we put the mics in the visors in front of each actor? Which in that scene, that's how they were done. I used a company called Sheps. They were in the visor. And why is that possible? Because in that particular scene, the windows are not open. So I'm not worried about wind noise wafting in from outside. If they were going to be in a scene where the windows were going to be down, then I would have had a hardwire lavalier strung up into their clothes. No need to use radio mics, since again the car is already pre-wired, and the snake coming out of the front of the back would hook up to wherever the insert car was either pushing or pulling, what we call the picture car. And then of course in post-production they're going to use a real Chevy Malibu and rev it and cruise with it and idle. They're going to use they're going to get clean effects of the doors opening and closing. They're going to get some Foley, some clothing rustle, and add to it. But all of that is referenced from what I heard in the location recording, and they're just going to build on top of it because maybe it doesn't have enough oomph for them, or maybe it's emphasizing the wrong part of the frequency band. And the thing that you have to be careful of in post is, since we only have from 20 hertz to 20,000 or 20K, everything has to fit within that frequency range. So sometimes what a post-production mixer will do is say, okay, I've got music that's in the same vocal range as Denzel. So I won't push Denzel's volume up, or I won't reduce the volume of the music, but I may carve out the frequencies that Denzel is on out of the music, leaving the music at the same level, but you carve those frequencies out, then that means his frequency, his use of those frequencies is going to cut through, as opposed to having to do it with volume. But essentially it's whatever works. And again, as you said, Kevin, the curse, and I'm sure Marlowe will speak to this as well, when it's done right, very few people in the audience noticed that there was anything amazing about it, because it's like, yeah, so what's the big deal?
Right. Yeah, definitely. I'm not sure if you can see it, but it seems like we kind of lost your camera. I can definitely still hear you, Russell. But yeah, thanks for breaking that down. Because I think, again, that's a part of the car and being inside it and that ride. And then as a viewer, it's extremely important that we feel like we're along for the ride, just like Ethan is. And so the sound plays a big deal in that, because as you can still hear that engine humming. What's up, Marlowe? It really helps us to sink into it. You on set, Marlowe?
Yeah. Actually, we're on nights, man. So you gotta forgive me. It's literally when you're walking with the dead, and we forget that they can walk all day and all night. But for us, it makes it a little bit harder, man, to function as long as they can. So being on nights is, I literally feel like I'm like zombieing right now, but hanging in there. How are you guys, man? It's a pleasure to see you.
Doing well. It's great to see you. Thanks for joining us from the set. We definitely appreciate it. I think you've been able to hear our conversation thus far.
Oh yeah, the zone 1, 2, and 3 absolutely nailed it. Just that whole consideration of what to look for in locations when you go to them. I think it's just really, really, important. And it's often overlooked. And like Russell said, when we get there, everything's beautiful. They're like, okay, we're ready to shoot. And you're like, no, wait a second. This is a sensitive love scene. Okay, so did we realize like the highway is right behind this house? So, and you don't want the actors to speak up. Okay, I totally understand. And sometimes, just being a sound mixer, you go ahead and just, Russell can, definitely agree with this. We figure out how to make it work. We dig into that chest, and like I heard him before with the chefs and the collet cables, and we try to figure out how to get that mic closer, and we make it work. But what I found is that a lot of times, if a person wants to shoot a location, I just ask them just really simply. I said, go to a location you love. I said, sit down for a second. I said, do me a favor and close your eyes and just listen and tell me what you see. And they're like, well, my eyes are closed. I said, exactly. I want you to sit down and then write it down on paper. I said, and also make note of that time of day you're at. So maybe it's noon. Okay, so and maybe noon is when you're going to come. It's going to be like this. But also consider from your locations guy, is noon 2 months from now going to be not the construction that's going to happen across the street, or not this hotel that's going to, so you also want to get a kind of a blueprint from your locations, he or him or her or whomever, what's going to be happening 2 months from now at 12 o'clock in the same place. You know what I mean? So, and then they'll go, oh crap, that's right. They're going to close the street off. Okay, so guess what? That's going to change the dynamic of what we're going to get from the scene at this park or in front of this house or in the street. And they go, oh, I said, but what I'd like you to do is just kind of close your eyes and just listen for a second, then write down, give me 5 things you hear. You just hear around you. And then I find that when a student does that for me and they come back and they go, wow, wait a minute. I didn't realize that I could hear this, and then I heard this behind me, and then it just totally opens their eyes. And I said, now open your eyes. Now look around at the things you heard and see, is that exactly what you heard is what you saw, you visually saw? And then they'll go, well, actually, when I look, I realized that I was overlooking that over there. So when I closed my eyes, I realized that was actually happening. So I think sometimes it helps them kind of figure out, okay, maybe this location may be hard, or maybe I don't want to do my love scene here, and it just kind of gives them a window to like think about things that bites them in the hand on the day of the shooting, and then it's just too late. You know, is what I was saying to Russell. Like, I remember on set, I did a big long ranting text to Russell, but it was just like, you know, that's the thing that really hurts, you know, up and coming filmmakers is, you know, they pick these wonderful locations, which is awesome, and visually that's great. But, you know, now we're getting to the point where we know sound has 50% of that love of that film, you know, and if the sound's not right, I don't care visually if you shot it in 20K. You know, I know cameras up to 8K now. We have an 8K camera on this set now, which is, you know, okay, that's great as 8K, but you know, what does it sound like still? So if it sounds bad, I don't care how visually how good it's gonna look. It's gonna still hurt that scene, and it's gonna hurt the director and what he or she wants to capture from that scene. So I think it's just really pertinent that they consider, you know, the location and have us come on that tech scout, you know, with our metering. And see, it's even worse now. I'm on a tech scout now, Russell, with my meter in my hand and then the wireless scanner in the other hand, and then my laptop hooked up to a wireless designer. Oh, it's just so much more stuff now to try to figure out, is my wireless going to work in this area? And what are my own RF working problems? So now I have that combated on top of everything else. So it's just like, oh, when is it ever going to end? But, you know, I know that's why we're, you know, sound nerds, and so we love it. So we just fight on, which is cool. But
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, that's what I'm talked about. That's what I meant. One of the things I meant when I said my problems can be invisible. So if you do have to use radios, and with a lot of people talking in multiple cameras, there's very few ways of doing that without using radio mics. How can you see what other frequencies potentially are going to impact the ones you want to use to get your scene? All right. But a camera person doesn't have to worry about that. I mean, it's very rare that they walk into some place and they're going to have something in the ultraviolet spectrum or something in the infrared that's going to shift the focus on the lens. I mean, it can happen, but generally speaking, they don't have to worry about that. Okay. They're dealing with visible light. And there are two things I want to throw at you, Kevin. My lovely TA for the last 3 years or more wants to know, is there a hashtag for this event? Because you know, she and a lot of other folks are hashtaggers.
Yeah, hashtag DC Black Film Festival, hashtag DCBFF 2021. So thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then two terms I want to throw on the viewers that are from physics, and then we'll move on. Inverse square law. All right. Generally speaking, that's the enemy of sound on the set. The inverse square law means once you double the distance from the source to the microphone, then you only get 1/4 of the energy each time. Okay, so as soon as we pull that microphone away, then all of a sudden, instead of hearing the direct sound of the voice you want to hear, you're starting to hear it, but you're also getting all these other extraneous sounds. And because of the frame, you may end up getting so far away from the actor from a microphone point of view that they're almost unrecognizable. So what's good sound? Think of good sound basically as the way NPR sounds. And that's a voice right in the sweet spot of a microphone. And of course, you're not going to be able to get that all the time, but that's the goal you're going for. Okay. Because there's also something called camera perspective, which, of course, the further away I get, the more I should sound like I'm getting further away. The other thing that really undoes most people when it comes to location scouting or anything like that is what is called a novelty detector neuron, NDN. Okay, you may not have heard of this in terms of the ear, but you've experienced this in terms of your olfactory nerves. When you put on your Chanel, or when you put on your Saks Fifth Avenue or your Tom Ford, you're like, damn, I smell good. And you're like that for about 2 or 3 minutes, and then after a while, your nose stops reminding you that you're wearing Chanel. It's on the hunt for a new, some new activity. Well, the same thing happens with the ears. Once you hear something that's steady and constant, like the fan on the computer, or the traffic noise, or the HVAC roaring in the background, that as soon as you get to this location, you may be aware of it, but then once you start talking and start trying to figure out where the camera should go and how to block this, you stop being aware of it. But guess what's not going to be stopped? The
Right.
microphone is going to hear this the entire time. So you either have to turn it off or move the microphone further away so it's not so present in the mix. So those are the only two things from physics I'm going to drop on you. And next question, Kevin, or questions from the viewers, however you want to roll.
Yeah. Listen, I mean, I know we're supposed to go till 8, but this seems like a hot. We got 2 questions here and one on Facebook. But what I did want to do, Russell, if it's cool with you, I wanted to show a clip from Marlowe's work so that he can just kind of break down how they went about recording this scene right here. Hold on 1 second as I bring it up.
Well, here, Marlowe's here to take me to school today, so I'm watching how the younger generation is doing it.
I love it. All right. You guys should be able to hear this. Here we go.
I'm free. I need everybody to repeat after me. I am a revolutionary. I am a revolutionary. I am a revolutionary. They can't never stop the party unless they stop the people. Way too high. Way too high. I'm high off the people. I'm high. I'm high. If you're there to struggle, you're there to win. If you're there not struggling, then goddammit, you don't deserve to win. I believe I'm gonna die half the people. I'm gonna die for the people because I live for the people. I live for the people because I love the people. Well, let me make it plain. Kill a few pigs, get a little satisfaction. Wait on. Kill some more pigs, get some more satisfaction. Kill them all, get complete satisfaction.
All right. Let me get this. Let me get my mic back on real quick. Obviously, this film, Judas and the Black Messiah, goes on to be an award-winning film and nominated for many awards and things like that. But in that particular scene, Marlowe, could you walk us through how you actually recorded it? There's so much that's going on, just like I kind of broke it down for Russell's scene. But, there we have, the audience. We have Daniel's character, Chairman Fred Hampton. We have the yelling, the screaming. That's a lot of energy. We got the drums going. Then when he's stomping, you really feel like that's the sound that Wood makes in a church. So how did you record all that to make it so real?
Well, the thing is, I've been thinking about that scene coming up to it, and in the back of my mind, I actually sat down with my mom initially, and I was like, Mom, when we were in church, just thinking like Baptist church and just a vibe, and she's like, well, it's all about the pew, and you have to capture, whoever's delivering or talking at the pew. And sometimes they hit the pew, so you might want to. And so I got some ideas from her. I was like, okay, yeah, this is right. So it's funny when you play that clip back. I realized something that I remember hearing the day of. Besides the fact that I always make this joke with Russell, which if no one knows, I call Russell Uncle Russ because he's just all knowledge for me, and it just kind of, if I have a question, man, it's like. He's like my favorite Uncle Maurice. Just I gotta get that out there. Who's also from California, and and then whenever I need something, it's always the best advice, the solid advice, and then that's Uncle, man, So I just want to say it. So in case I say Uncle Russ, you'll know who I'm referring to. But anyway, so what I decided is we're going to try to capture this, and we want to try to get it all in that one moment. So and just organically get everything, including the bongo guys. So all that is also mic'd by us. So we also did those guys, which they're, world-renowned performers. I believe they're out of Cleveland. They're really good. They're known throughout the city. So I figured they were going to play. So let's get those guys. But my main concern first was how we're going to get, Daniel at the pew, and he's probably going to hit it. So that hitting sound you hear him doing, that's the sound from this actually smacking that pew, which made me nervous because I was worried about the plant mic. So as far as the practical mic in front of Daniel, we made that hot, which is the mic in front of him, to give you that like kind of nostalgia sound, because we were in a period show. And then he's mic'd, and then we had two different booms on him because one got the warmer tone and got when he's really, really strong, when he's really yelling. So when you watch that tape, all that's ad lib. Daniel said that he had never experienced being able to have any crowd react with him like that. So our very first tape, which I really thank Shaka King, he did it to take traditional film style. And Uncle Russell, I'm talking about. It just, all Daniel did was talk and the crowd pantomimed. So they act like that. And it was really dry. I ran up the stairs to Shaka and I said, please, let everyone go. Let them cheer him when he comes up the stairs. Just full interaction. Just let it go. And he looked at me and was like, let it go. I said, yeah. I said, have them scream. I mean, just, and he said, okay. And he turned to the first AD, and she's a wonderful British lady. And he said to her, Marlowe wants everything to be organic. We wanted to go. And I just remember in her British tone of voice, it was so funny. I think this is a really bad idea. Because they were worried about Daniel. And also Daniel's accent is really strong. So there's a vocal coach there making sure that he's hitting all those words without you hearing his British accent, which is amazing when you hear him talk normally, because you're going like, how did he? So it makes you really understand, like, wow, this guy deserved an Oscar, not just from the performance, but how well he was able to keep the tonality and that energy up and never slip to British tone. So anyway, jumping back down. So what we did was he said, okay, we'll go with this whole thing. She said, I think it's a bad idea, but we'll do it. And so organically, as soon as Daniel heard the crowd cheering him coming upstairs, he said, I've never felt such an enrichment and such a warm feeling. He said, if this is how, actors or performers feel in concert, when crowd goes, he said, that's what I felt. And so that's how you see the freestyle. So when you watch the scene and he's like, I want y'all to repeat after me. I am, and then, are you high, 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 high? He just said he was doing that because the crowd kept repeating him. So he said it just juiced me up, and I just kept going. And so when I watch it now, you truly see it. And so what he did to regulate the crowd's over chanting, he said, no, like that. And he put his finger up, and then the crowd go, okay, we got to stop, And so let him talk, and then they jump. And so you just couldn't get that any other way. And I believe me, knock on wood, I was praying that it was going to work just like that, and it did, And that was also mic in the crowd. We picked a couple people in between the crowds to mic them to add a little bit of nuance, or personal, or like a closer sound, like, hey man, that stuff. And then, all the other mics, and it worked. And one thing I always make a joke. I said, Uncle Russ, I had to make sure that I was hitting record because it was
very important.
Because you got to make sure that you truly are rolling, especially on a performance like that. And right to the right of me, when I look, I could see Fred Hampton Jr. and his mom. So they're sitting. Video Village is literally right to my right, and Fred Hampton Jr. like he just had tears, And you could see his mom, and she just was like, they were just like, they just couldn't believe it. Like this was it. Like, it's like, how are we capturing this? And in their cans, we gave them nice Sony No Baloney headphones, so they could really hear like the warm and the low, hear better, And so they were just I can't even really put in words. Like, Fred Hampton Jr. walked up to me and said, amazing job, Marlo. That's just amazing to hear that like that. So that just made me feel even that much better. And then, to get all the accolades in the end from Post and from Skip, who's like a world-renowned recording mixer, that they also were concerned because there's not a lot of, African-American color, in the library for us rebuilding that scene. So they were prepared to bring in, because that was 350 plus people in that church.
Wow.
So when you hear them screaming and chanting, that's really them. None of that was replaced. All of
Wow.
that is my sound, from my guys and my team. So it just really like speaks volumes. Like like you playing it now, it's almost made me tear up. But
Man, what I love about you guys is you can hear the passion, as you guys say tanning and you say all these different inverse square law, but you guys are passionate about it, and it comes through in your work. We have one of our filmmakers, Raquez Rouse. He is the director of Melanin. He had a question for you all.
Yes, and thank you so much again, Mr. Kevin, and also Mr. Marlowe and Mr. Russell as well. My question is, when you are recording a scene, because Mr. Russell, I remember you saying about with the car, you had like the mics with the engine and things like that to get the little intricate sounds. How much of it is the original recording when you see the final product versus adding artificial sound or in post-production? How much is actually what you organically record versus when you're finished, we had to go back and add this because that really wasn't what it sounded like. We had to add like a soundscape of some sort, a sound effect. How does that work?
Well, I would say, and it's an excellent question, because you would have to evaluate that on a scene by scene basis. So similar to what Marlowe did in Judas in the scene we just looked at, saying Glory, there's a scene where Denzel and the cast are saying tear it up when they don't want to accept half the payment that the white soldiers are going to do. And we essentially did the same thing. We did a couple takes clean, meaning just with the principal actors, and then we did 2 or 3 takes with everybody shouting, and then forces the principal actors to rise above them. In Glory, there's a scene where we meet the Confederates for the first time, and that's all production sound. Versus when you see the final battle in Glory, when we assault the fort, it's production up until it becomes nighttime, and then the rocket's red glare effect in the sky basically drowned out most of and by that time it's mostly just commands, stand ready or keep your heads down. In a movie that has mechanical elements like in Training Day, or say for instance Rules of Engagement or something like that, post-production is always going to add something. So the key is, if you got a pristine recording on location, that may survive, but it may also be replaced in spots, not because the sound at location wasn't well done, but maybe the director wants a different line reading. He or she wants the line to go up in inflection rather than down in inflection. Okay. There are times if you're talking about movies like the Transformers and things like that, it would be highly unlikely that much of the location sound would survive, because there's so many things going on set. There's so many camera angles going on at once that it's more, I mean, in terms of just sheer dollars, they're more concerned about the picture being fascinating, and they have already budgeted to replace all the sound if necessary. Okay. Now, for those of us that don't have a budget, your goal should be to get everything as possible on location, as clean as possible. And as Marlowe had mentioned the term with Judas, he said period piece, and period goes backwards or forward. All right, but backward is a little bit easier to imagine, because we know what things sounded like behind us. So we know that anything present day, for the most part, that's man-made probably didn't sound that way, including cars, including airplanes, including motorcycles, and on down the list. But dishes, maybe, you know what I'm saying? But most of the stuff that we hear today didn't sound the same way in the 60s, the 1940s, the 1860s, the 1700s. So that means your location has to be even more pristine, meaning if you can't be out in the middle of nowhere like we had for Dances with Wolves, where we didn't hit any of the 20th century. Whereas in Glory, we were close to Savannah, but far enough away that by the time you heard the city, it was easy enough to drown it out with the period sounds. So, Marlo, you may have some thoughts about this because you've worked on pictures that were effects heavy, and then you worked on pictures that were more dialogue driven. And like me, I'm sure you would always go and listen to whatever the mixed components were, and the post-production people are calling you and say, what mic did you use for this, and how did you all get this? Because they realize that if they can get it as good as you got it when you had it perfect, then that's what they want to match. They don't want to say, hey, this is post-production here. They want it to all sound flawless.
Really quickly, gentlemen, Raquez, I'm gonna let you go. Thank you for your question. Definitely appreciate it. You guys, the questions are really coming in now. I got questions on Facebook, a question in the chat, another question. So I just want to make sure that we honor your time. Do you got time to go past the 8 o'clock hour? If so, then we'll do that. And we won't go like till 8:30 or something, but we'll go past. But then also I'll just kind of cut things down so that we can get through these questions as well.
Yeah, I'm good. I mean, it's just 5 p.m. for me.
Okay, yeah, I'm also game for anybody if they want to like send me a message through one of the, the other digital forums. I can answer them that way too. So if they want to, I'm on Instagram, MT Sound Mixer, a Gmail, so they get me on, and I'll answer questions that way too. So I'm cool with that. Anything it takes to help, I'd love to.
Word. All right. Sorry, Marlo. Go ahead. Did you want to answer that question, or I could pose a question that y'all got from Facebook?
Oh, I mean, I don't know. Russell just really slammed dunk that the last guy's question. I mean, it's to the T. You know what I mean? As far as because it always changes on basis of what post wants. But the thing, what we do is we try to make sure that if we can and we have the time, which Uncle Russell knows, meaning we have the time to set up that extra plant mic or this extra mic over here, or hide that chef plant to get a little bit more of these footsteps, or you know what I mean? If we have time to do that, it's great, and we can put that on the track because now, with the way we work now, we have an abundance of tracks, at our fingertips, so we can add a track in there, and that does help them to have a guide of what they heard or what the footsteps were, and if they want to, they can lay it down there and just build on top of them. Which I found a lot of times that if we get the car, we get the exhaust, but they just needed to add a little bit more low end. They can do stuff in post and bring it up a little bit and round it out, and they can go with the car. And we captured this old 1967 car with a bunch of different mics and the exhaust, and it worked great. So sometimes it works, and then sometimes you just need to add a little bit more to it, but keep what we did on location. So it's just, as much as we can do to help post, is great, because also, just so you know, for any sound mixers, post-production is also can be the end of how you get the next job. So you can't have the thoughts of, well, I'm just here on location, I'm only gonna do just this or just that. If you could do some of the extra things to help in the end and you have time and your team is good enough to understand what to do, I'll put that mic there and they're thinking for you while, because Uncle Russ will tell you, we're dealing with the director, we're dealing with the producers, and we're dealing with talent. And all those elements are coming at us all the time, so we got to keep talent happy. If talent doesn't like this wire here, so there's always a dance, there's handshakes all the time. So if you have a team that's good enough to go, well, hey boss, I planted a plan over there because they're gonna rush this door to lock out the zombies, like what we did this morning. I said, oh, great, thanks, And then when I talked to post, they love that. That's perfect, even though it was basically an MOS shot. Still what happened was the actors still talked. They still ran and they did some talking and let's lock down this door before the walkers get in. I can't tell you what scene that is, but it's but so we do those kind of stuff, and so it's there. If post wants it, then they have it. They want to play it low in the mix, then they have it. If they want to add, build on top of it, at least we rolled on it and they know what was happening. So then they can build on it. So it becomes those plus things. And if you can have posts be on your side and agree with what you're doing, it can help you. And later, because your next job, they may call that post department and say, hey, how was, Russell Williams sound for it? Oh, it was amazing. It was great, So it goes a long way, you know what I mean? So you want to try to make everyone else's job easier. And that goes along with your sound reports. in your digital reports. Did you title all the actors' voices on track so they know it was John on one, Paul on two, that way. So when they get in post, they know what they're looking at. There's little things like that, that upcoming sound guys need to consider, that are important. So just because you don't see posts, don't mean they're not there,
Right. Well, you guys, and Russell, did you have something that you were going to add on? Because you got a question from Facebook that's along the lines of post-production. Did you have something to add, Russell?
I do indeed. And while it's fresh in everybody's mind, picking up on what Marlowe just talked about, most importantly, the directors and the producers that are on this webcast, post-production, location, props, costumes, visual effects, all of these departments are working for the director's vision to be realized. So the reason that we want to do things extra on location in terms of wild track or getting alternate takes or maybe voiceover or, just something that, this is an interesting sound. It may not have anything to do with the movie at this point, but it's interesting, and maybe the editors or somebody downstream will find it interesting. That's so that the directors, meaning you all, when this track is played for you, this scene is played for you, it's like, okay, is that helping realize the vision you had when this was just words on paper, or is it going in another direction that you don't want it to go in? This is all on your behalf. So that's why it's important for the director producers to get on the team even before you get into pre-production. And that person is generally called a sound designer. That person is there to look at the script, have conferences with you in the stages before you even go look at locations to say, okay, so you have an idea of how the visuals are going to be structured, but do you have any coherent view of how what we hear is going to bring us into the character's diegetic reality? Okay, and so as opposed to thinking about sound after the picture is shot, one sound designer I talked to in my sound design class at American on the film Baby Driver, they had picked the music for that 18 months before they even got any digital zeros and ones. And the action scenes were choreographed to the music. So they already had the licensing in place and all of that. And they played the music in rehearsal. So even if music wasn't actually playing as far as the audience, the viewing audience, they were moving to a beat that was already, pre-choreographed. So when they did get to this scene or that scene, it's already there. And that's only because the director was hearing this movie, as Marlowe was saying, close your eyes and see and tell us what you see. He was hearing the movie even before they figured out what lens to put on the camera. Okay, you can have the prettiest lens in the world, doesn't mean that you have a film worth looking at. And that's another thing I want to make, a point I want to make before we go on, because I know this question is going to come up. It's the ear, it's not the gear. Okay, some people think that well, if I have a Sheps or if I have a Norman, that stuff is important, but that's just a tool. You can take a hammer and break a window. You can take a hammer and mold clay with it. But it's like what you do with that tool. And if you don't know how to use that tool is useless. Okay, now I'll shut up and let's move on.
Man, y'all dropping gems right now. Over at Facebook, Mike Sampson, you kind of already answered this, but I guess it was on the post-production portion. He was saying, just for example, on a major film like Training Day, how much time is usually given in post-production to get the sound mixing right before the part of the film is turned in, or that part of the film is turned in. And are there times when the post-production sound mixer or re-recordist says, hey, this recording really should have been done a lot better in production, and it can't really work with this scene? What happens then? What do they do?
Well, on the feature level, because they get footage basically every day from what's done on set, then the picture editors are generally assembling these scenes as they come in. So while, say for instance, if it's a 5-month shoot, They don't wait till month 5 to start assembling scenes. They're assembling stuff 24 to 48 hours after it's actually captured. And the 48 hours would mean that we're shooting in a different country from where editorial is. And that would have been true in the film days. Now with a VPN, they can see it the same day, right? Because it's in a digital pipeline. So it's not like they're going to wait months down the road to decide whether or not the location recording was suitable enough. They're going to know that then. And then the dialogue editors are going to start marking places where either they're going to borrow some of that dialogue from another take and say, if we can put words in the actor's mouth from what was recorded on location. And if that doesn't work, they'll say, okay, we're going to have to ADR, automated dialogue, record this particular portion of the scene. And this train is being assembled all the way through while we're still in production. So now when the director finally gets to post into the big rooms and he or she's now listening as well as watching, that's when they say, okay, you know what? Let's take the rain down a little bit. Let's take the music down a little bit, and let's just hear her breathing, or let's ramp up the car, or let's make the guns louder, or let's make the guns recede and just look at the muzzle flashes. That's why when you're on location, someone like Marlowe, who's willing to work with you, give him options so he can give you options. You do not, unless you're into bondage, you do not want to be bound to only one way of doing this once you get the editorial. Okay? So that's one of the reasons that his British assistant director said, well, maybe it's not a good idea to have everybody yell along with Daniel, but you can always get it clean. And they already had it clean. So it's like, okay, we know we have the performance, but let's see if we can get a better performance because everybody can feed off of each other. If you only had it that way and it didn't work, now you're in trouble. But because you have it both ways, now you can say, well, we can take this line off the clean performance because we still have the crowd. We should know what was done in post and what was done on location. Marlowe, you have any additional thoughts that I didn't cover?
I mean, honestly, I think you really covered it all really well. I mean, just the whole thought of what we do on location, you know, and I think too, for the up and coming filmmakers and directors doing stuff, you know, it's if you can get with your sound person, he or she, and also go with them to the locations, talk to them about. It's just not about how many wires can they do, you know, because that's usually one of the main things. You know, how many people can you wire, you know, but it's about what are the other elements going on? And if it's a smaller production, you really want them to try to capture, like Uncle Russ said, you want them to be able to capture as much elements as possible. So if there is something going on across the street from your house, or it's making noise and it's a constant noise, you know, have a mixer, go put a plant mic right by it. You know, so now you actually have that. So when you get to post, if they need to learn how to remove that sound, they'll run their track that you recorded this noise across the street. They have a system now that can learn that sound and then apply that processing to remove this noise from your dialogue. But now you have it where they at least have a piece to learn it from in order to, because the dialogue is not enough space. Even though you're trying to find a little space to cut to get, it's just not enough because in between that space, then it was footsteps, you know? So then you'll do that. And maybe the sound is actually nice. Like Russ said, when you sit back and you look at the scene, you know, the director goes, you know, actually that sound doesn't bother me at all. And as everything comes down, I like it. It's a nice ambience. And just bring up this or take everything into like a distant sound. And so as they're talking, I wanted to start fading into like this reverb decay sound, like it's a dream. And then I'll wash out of that into the next edit. And you go, okay, great. So the thing is try to give, you know, the director or the producer as a sound mixer all those options. So for example, this morning, we didn't have to put all the plant mics down for all the crowd running towards the doors to stop the walkers, you know, on this Fear the Walking Dead show. But it just turned out it was really cool. And also, when the director heard it, he was kind of like, oh, yeah, okay, yeah, so I heard what you said. Matter of fact, can you now run across this way, you know? So it actually was to benefit. And he was like, you know, thanks, Marlowe. And I was like, cool. So sometimes, you know, get that. And mind you, not all the times we get a thanks or that's cool. But we know as sound guys, we're doing the best that we can for the director and for this vision. And that's just what we should just do. You know what I mean? I think if you do that, you know, I think the rewards will come to you you know, when it's time. And if not, just you still know you did a good job and you just keep going. And I think that's, you know, my
All right.
favorite part.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Marla. And I mean, you guys are giving us some nuggets. We got a question from the audience.
Hey, can you guys hear us?
Yep.
Yeah, we can.
Hey, how you guys
Hi.
doing? Hey, Professor
Oh, man,
Williams, how you
pleasure.
doing?
Yeah.
I
Good
just
to see you too.
Always good to see you.
Yeah, so I just want to thank you all very much for just coming out and just like, you know, giving us your expertise with you all just being in the industry as long as you have been. So we really appreciate that we just get to be a part of this discussion and everything. So Professor Williams, I know we definitely talked about, you know, these subjects multiple times. So this is just a question that I did have for you. So in particular, I wanted to know, just as I just finished, you know, kind of like my first short film, I was really trying to look for ways to just get my diegetic use of diegetic and non-diegetic sound. So I just want to know, what are some of the most, what are some films or just like some work that you've seen where non-diegetic sound was used in very creative ways? I hope I phrased that correctly.
Okay, I think that's a great question. And just so everybody's clear, diegetic sound or anything diegetic is something that the character on screen or characters on screen would experience in the filmic world we are creating. And non-diegetic are sounds that only we, the viewing audience, hear, and the character is supposedly not aware of those. So the most important non-diegetic sound, you know, I mean, throughout movie history is music. Okay, and that's underscore as opposed to source music, as opposed to they're playing music, you know, in the scene and we hear the music as well. But I have a sound buddy out here in LA that refers to film scores as emotional fascism. You know, because in the early days before we had spoken dialogue, the music told you how to feel at any given moment of a production. But I would say one of my favorite films, and there are two different versions of it, but in Girl with a Dragon Tattoo, the one that stars Daniel Craig, in some of the flashback scenes, they do some really creative recreations where Daniel Craig's character is reading a police officer's notes about what happened in this disappearance. And in the flashback, you just kind of get suggestions of, okay, there's water on the river and there's traffic, and then they get off these rowboats and they're searching through an island, and then you hear people calling back and forth. And it's really, yes, thank you, the David Fincher version. It's really done skillfully because Daniel Craig's character could not have heard any of that. But the way it's created, it gives you kind of what his mind is doing to create what it must have been like reading this officer's notes. And then at the end of that sequence, you see a young police officer in uniform, and he's lighting a cigarette, and that becomes a match cut to when the cigarette goes in the mouth of the present day in the movie older officer as he's, you know, telling the story. That's one way. Another way, which it's not really non-diegetic, it just is not synchronous in the sense that most movies, and one of the first times I worked on a film like this was the movie Taps with George C. Scott and Sean Penn and some of these guys, Tom Cruise, and a lot of these guys who weren't there when I worked on it. I was just there to work on effects. And many movies do this where you have scenes that are shot on a stage, and we don't have the actual exterior sounds on the stage to go with them. So you'll see movies where you hear planes going by, but you never see the helicopter or the plane because they don't have it. They can't afford it. Okay, but as far as we're concerned, they went by and it's on a military base, so we accept it. If you go back to one of the movies that woke most modern day sound designers, I mean modern day in my age group, which is mid 60s to 70s, Once Upon a Time in the West. Okay, there's a scene not quite halfway through, but maybe a third of the way through when we meet Jason Robards' character, where the people inside the bar just see a cloud of dust outside the saloon. But in the soundtrack, you're hearing yells, you're hearing horses, you're hearing a shootout, and you're hearing people getting hit and scuffling away and running this way. And then at the end of all of that, you see Jason Robards walking to the saloon. Now, how much money did they save by not going outside and shooting that actual escape scene? All we did was hear it diegetic. I mean, we heard it, but of course, when the actors were watching it, they didn't hear any of that. They were just told to look at the bar at the doors, and all they saw was the sand and the dust from the horses being kicked around. Okay, and the last little thing I'll drop in, which may be related or unrelated, but I want to pick up on something that Marlowe said when he asked his people to go somewhere, close their eyes, and listen to what they are listening to, and then what does that let them see? I want all you young directors and producers, before you say cut, print, moving on. If you have visual, if you have your video village there, when you think that you know you have it, okay, turn your back to that monitor and have the video assist person play it one more time, and now see if that scene works as radio. Do the line readings actually fit the emotional moments you want to hit? Because see, you're all caught up in, okay, they got the look right, and they got the action right and everything. But then when you get to post, you might say, I don't like the way he or she said that. Turn your back to the screen, and now, because it's got to work as radio. And when I was working on set, that's the way I tried to get my location sound. So even if there were no picture to look at, you still heard and can see the scene in your head. That's why War of the Worlds as a radio show frightened a lot more people than either one of the feature films. I'm done running my mouth. Next question.
Man, we all are just listening. I'm quiet. I'm taking notes. Marlowe, did you have something to add on that?
Yeah, it's perfect. I mean, he segued right into an exact. In Judas, we had a scene where Daniel, they come to see the crowns. It's a big scene. The crowns, they loaded with the guns, all that stuff. As that whole scene builds, it's at the end where the leader of the crowns, he has to do a whistle. And that whistle allows everyone that's protecting the top and all of them to know that, you know, I whistle, they're cool to go, see them out, don't touch them. They got our respect. The whistle meant a lot. Well, the actor could not really whistle. So he's a tall brother, you know, he couldn't whistle. So when he whistled, it was like, and let me tell you guys, Daniel bust out laughing, and all the crew, you know, Lakeith, everyone was. So we tried 2 takes, and Daniel still was. Everyone's laughing. So what we did was we went and whipped out. Basically, it's a Pro Tools type of situation. We whipped it out. We loaded up a whistle, got the playback speaker, put my utility guy on it, who was Pro Tools certified. When the crowns guy did like this, and he blows a whistle, you trigger that whistle sound, that loud whistle sound. And then everyone could get the cue all the way in the back of the room. The talent could hear the whistle, so they knew to turn around, and everybody could react because they could hear the whistle. And that's what we did every take. And that whistle is the whistle that they use in post, because not only did we trigger the whistle through a speaker in the room to add the right vibe for that scene, which is exactly what Russell was just saying, you know, but it also, I laid it on a track, so I gave it to post. So when post was putting the scene together, the whistle was the perfect whistle. It's the, you know, so we don't really have to find another whistle in post. The mixer gave it to us. You know what I mean? So, and it's synced, it worked, so done deal. So that was 2 birds with 1 stone. And also, well, maybe 3, because then you made the actors happy. And they were able to still stay in character, you know? And it just rounded the whole scene out. And then, of course, the producers were on edge because, you know, time's ticking. Every time they bust out laughing after all of this dialogue, we're resetting, you know. So it just solved everything across the border. So that's a moment where the sound department steps up again to the plate and says, we can take care of that. He just needs to just give us like 2 minutes. And then we're like, Okay, and we did it literally in 2 minutes. You know what I mean? Like we got it all set up, fired up Pro Tools, boom, here's a whistle, played a couple for the director. He said, "Well, I love that one." Okay, great. We're gonna go with that one, and so we did, and there you have it. And that's the whistle and the crown scene. So that we actually did on set.
Man, I love these behind the scenes stories. I think now when I watch this scene again, I'm probably gonna start laughing.
Yeah, just imagine like this tall brother, and he whistles, it sounds like a bird chirping. And Daniel just couldn't hold it in, man. And everyone, Lakeith was laughing. It was so funny, man. So, but yeah. Producers were getting a little on edge because it was time. It was taking
right.
right. So, but yeah, so that's what we did for that, and that's exactly what Russell put down. So that whole plan and premise of how sound can actually come, and help and save a scene, was like, and that was really over and beyond as far as sound, but we did it without question. So
Now I have one that I don't. Well, it's non-diegetic, but it doesn't appear in the film so much as it was the way that the actor prepared herself for a scene, and that's when we were on Waiting to Exhale, and Angela
snap.
Bassett was getting ready to do the scene where she goes out and throws all her knucklehead husband's clothes in the Beamer and sets it on fire, right? And so she came over to me because I was known for having what we call a sound lounge on set. So while the lighting crew is doing their thing and my crew has already figured out how to mic and who to mic and where to plant. So in the meantime, I've got music playing, and it goes from country western to European concert to jazz to whatever, because you've got 100 people or more on set, and you want folks to stay loose. You know what I'm saying? You don't want everybody to get so tense that it turns. No, the fist fight's supposed to be on the screen, not behind the screen. You know what I'm saying? So Angela came over to say, well, Russell, I really need to help get myself into this. So could you play something for me? I said, what's it on? She said, what's a CD? I said, here's a CD player. Here are the headphones. Here are the controls. And I'll come back to see you when they say first team. And if those of you who may not be familiar with Hollywood jargon, first team means, of course, the principal cast. And the reason she had time to come listen to this music, whatever it was, to get her in the mood, is because second team, the stand-ins were there while we were lighting. And so I don't know what she was listening to, but she sure knocked it out when we said action. And so, but that really is not clearly non-diegetic in the sense of Trevor's question. But it's whatever needs to be done within reason to serve the story and to serve the storytellers. And one little thing I want to add that I heard from a director of photography that I loved, a guy named Woody Omans, and met him when we worked on Boomerang. And he was one of the ultimate team players. And that's hard to say because I work with a lot of great cinematographers. You don't get Oscars in sound with a cinematographer that hates sound. You know what I'm saying? They could just make your life miserable. You know what I'm saying? So, but Woody said that if you use the term filmmaker, his definition of filmmakers, regardless of whether you're props, your camera, your costume, you're the actor, whatever you do, craft service, is that your role is to do whatever needs to be done to make the project successful. So you may live in local 80 as a prop person, but you know what I'm saying? If you can help sound, you're there to help sound. If you're there to do something that's going to help the costume department look better, then you're there to do that. If you need to help the drivers figure out something, you're there to do that. I mean, the first people I would befriend on a feature were the Teamsters. You know what I'm saying? You do not want the Teamsters like thinking, okay, where can we hide Russell's truck today? You do not want to experience it. You know what I'm saying? You do not want them working against you, okay? And Marlowe has his own rig, and he still says, who's the Teamster captain? Hello, boom. This is how I like this done. How can I help you? What do you need? And this is how a real show works. It's collaborative. There is no free lunch. There are no standalone, like, well, I live on this island, and everybody works for me. No, player. I've seen a whole lot of stars find out how much they depend on their makeup, hair, and wardrobe people. Don't get me in the mix, and I just happen to dial you down so you sound like Mickey Mouse in dailies.
Russell talking that talk, man. I don't know if we could I know we can't get away with something like that.
You can get away with it once.
We call it technical. Sorry, we had a technical. Technical.
Now, Marlowe, I shouldn't tell you this, but in my era, before we had video assist, so I have to read along on the script, and I have to, and since we didn't have multiple tracks to play with, the most I ever had was 2 until we got to the digital world. Then I had 4 or 8. But in my early days, the most I had was 2. So if I've got actor on one channel, another actor on another channel, I've got to crossfade, and not completely, but just emphasize one when their line comes up. And of course, somebody ad libs or they drop a line. I'm like, So the first thing they tell you, especially if you do sound, as soon as they say cut, say, I need another one, rather than hoping that somebody else doesn't like it and then say, oh, well, it wasn't good for me. Now just throw the flag right away. But see, you also have a permanent tan, so you can't be the only one throwing the flag. Because then they start saying, okay, is this really an objective problem, or is this person no good? So I used to carry marbles and maybe some heavy bolts and things like that in my back pocket. And I always used to sit way, way back from camera. So if I got fooled on another take, I could surreptitiously take something out of my pocket and throw it up into the lighting grid. King, kang, pong, pong, pong. Cut, what was that? Just something that the AD and the director and everybody else would hear. Now it's not my problem. It's, some gripper electrician that made noise up in the green beds. So they're not cutting because I screwed up. They're cutting because there was an ejected noise. Right. Okay. Once we got video assist, I could predict, I could see the future a lot easier. But back in the old days, I'd throw that thing out there, and I'd come out and look at the director. I'm like, can we get some people who can work with us? So that's a nugget that you probably won't need, but if you do, just make sure you're not in line of sight of anybody. Just toss that. What was that? Shut up over there. I mean, come on. We're making a feature film here, people. We got a reality television show.
I needed that. That's awesome.
That's
awesome.
Hey, that's how your uncle had to survive back in those days, man. I didn't have no backup. I didn't have any backup back then, man.
Right.
But that's hilarious in some ways, but it goes to our ingenuity, right? And I joke and laugh about the fact that you say, hey, you got a permanent tan, but wow, just we know that like 90% of filmmaking is solving problems, but then also for you, Russell, and in your era, making sure that you weren't the squeaky wheel all the time, right? And so we laugh at that bag of marbles, but at the same time, that was a great trick that kept you going, right? So wow, man, thank you so much.
He bought his own ticket, every time. I was like, how can I kind of bum my way out of this marble? Marble, okay, cool. Yeah. Because it's absolutely right. It is, but for me, I feel like, Russell and, other mixers like Willie and, all those guys are the guys that have paved the way to show that, as possible, with the tan, what we're doing, and I just feel like, me coming through this and like picking it up and still pushing is just really good because there's a lot of people, of color that, with the permanent tan that are really talented, man, and I think that it's good that we're just building those blocks and it's touching. And then they can also see us and go, wow, Russell Williams is 2 times going on. Emmys, and okay, wow, just how can I get that? Well, no, wait, where's his other brother, Marlowe? He's coming up, and it's like, and we're just pushing, and I think another thing too was missing is for all those filmmakers that are coming in this, we realize that everyone's people. You're a people person. When you come to the job, come to the job fresh with approaching the job, and when you leave the job, if it was a bad day, don't take it with you, man, because the next day starts over. So when you leave the show, go home that night, maybe that today was a rough day, we've all had them, but you got to shake it off because the next day, guess what? When the director walks back up, it's game on again. So you can't say, well, yesterday I had this problem, because the director's like, okay, well, that was yesterday, okay, so today, are we good today, or do I need to be getting another mixer? So you have to just realize, like, you got to just put on your work boots. You know what I mean? And stuff might get a little deep, so maybe you get the deeper boots. Everybody know what I'm talking about. I'm not cursing, but you know what I mean. And you just got to roll with it. You know what I mean? Of course, in respectful ways, but just realize that you're there to do your job, and you just want to do it to the best that you can. You know what I mean? And that goes across the border for any color, but for us, maybe a little bit harder to show. So we might not be able to do the marble trick or buy a ticket. So that means you just got to work that much harder now, to cover stuff. You know what I mean? So it's just a different day and age, but it's all right. You know what I mean? It's still, the war is still the same. You know what I mean? Like I was talking to Uncle Russ on the side, it's still the same battle, but we're opening more doors, which is great. You know what I mean? And being able to get calls and stuff for shows and in larger shows is just a feat within itself. So just to have those accomplishments are really good, And like I was talking to Uncle Russ, and he was like, I didn't know you did that show. It was a Liam Neeson show that was also in the theater. He's like, I just watched that, But, for viewers, if you get a chance, the movie's called The Marksman, but they used a lot of the post effects we did with hiding mics, and distance to get the actors who were standing there. He was yelling, but he's yelling into a field. And I was like, it'd be really cool if we put a mic over here and we put one here and we do a XYMS way back there, So when he yells, you get this projection. So if you get a chance to watch the movie, The Marksman, it's the scene where the bad guy's trying to find Liam Neeson and the kid, and they're in a field, but he doesn't know where. It's at night. But he stands on top of something, and he's like, I'm going to find you. And when I do, I'm going to kill you. Like he goes in, but that sound you hear, the echo reverberant, that was exactly what I did on location. So just want to add that in there, just as a cool point to let you know that Post really does appreciate good stuff we do in the field now, because it saves them time. You know what I mean? And time is money. Like Uncle Russ said, yes. Now they're spitting dailies out. They're looking at it immediately. I mean, there's almost shows where they're literally streaming the show, and people are watching the show in LA, and then while we're shooting it on set, and then phoning in the changes. It's like, wow. And then they can play it back. And like, they want to watch it again, so they can watch it again and say, oh yes, he should have said this, or he should have turned to the left, and what's on his wrist, he should have that, So that's where we are now. So, a little harder for me to throw a pebble, but but still, so, but I think that also just makes you stay more on your game, now even more so, because that margin for error is just that much smaller,
Well, I would say in your generation, you have Bluetooth. Okay, and you have a wireless speaker somewhere that you got a little button that you can hit, and it can be somebody talking. It's going to be short, but it's going to be something that does what the marble did without you having to do anything. You're sitting there with your headphones on, acting like you're mixing, War of the Worlds, and then what was that? All the ADs and the PAs are running around trying to figure out where that is. So you got Bluetooth now. So I had to throw a physical marble. You can throw a digital marble, bro.
Throw a digital marble. Yeah.
Throw a digital one.
Hey, I mean, well, I didn't want Uncle Russ to put that idea out, but thank you. It's a great idea. I was already on like, I know we can check that one, but no, it's awesome.
Look, I mean, it's like it's because it's digital, okay? Because producers, directors, and other folks come in assuming that it's easier to get it the first time, but you also have a perfect recording of either how great it possibly is or how bad it was. Okay. And because they feel, well, we can take this frequency out and we can, reverse azimuth this and make this noise go away. But does it really sound like human beings talking, or does it sound more robotic because the algorithms are making all the changes? So, I think the real key, as Marlowe was saying, is know your craft, whatever your craft is. But I think we have actually seen over the last 2 or 3 years the people who came into the business who felt like being the bully was the only way to get to the top, and then they're being identified one by one and being pulled off of their pedestal. And so now folks are like, yeah, but are they hard to work with? They could be a genius, but are they hard to work with? Yeah, they're really hard. Yeah, we're cool. We're cool. You know what? Because who needs it? So the people skills are primary. You have to know the politics, but on the day you have to deliver. Okay, whatever your title is, if you're a third PA on a film that has a budget of $100, you still have to perform as if you were on Black Panther 2, because somebody's watching you. Everything that I got that turned out to be something golden was from a show where it was somebody's baby. We had this much money or less, but they remembered my work ethic. They remembered my personality. They remembered that I stood up for my work, and that as a department head, that if something went wrong, I said, look, you know what? Blame me. We'll get it right. And then I'll go talk to my crew. Now I'm gonna take the hit for you one time. The next time I'm gonna make a phone call. You know what I'm saying? But it's my job to take the hit. I'm the department head. Okay. So you have to own it, and they appreciate you for that. I worked on a TV series where and this is back in the analog days. You all have to look this up on Google, when we were using reel-to-reel tape. Okay. And a guy that was my mentor way back in the early days noticed on that Nagra, which you have to get a picture of that, Nagra, this is the stopper off position. This is the test position. This is record without limiter. This is record with limiter. So after a take, you could just go from record to test, which means you could just hear the audio coming into the machine. He said, no. Go down through playback and then come back up to test. I said, but won't that wear out the knob eventually? He said, yeah, but here's what happens. If you continue to do this, suppose you make a mistake and don't put the correct reel on. You take a reel that's not virgin and put it back on. If you just do this all day, you'll eventually burn that whole reel. If you do this and go through playback and come back up, you will hear something going in reverse and realize, oh, I put a reel back on the machine that already had content on it. I'm talking about 100 years later, this happens to me. Wow. And I said, thank God for Bill Cooper. And this was take 3. On the radio, I heard the AD release the actor. I ran around from where I was to the courtroom this is for a Billionaire Boys Club TV miniseries back in the 80s. I said, we need to do take 3 again. What happened? It was a technical error. I said, I think I burned a piece of take 3, because I had told them I was reloading. But they said, no, we got to talk to you right now. And then when I got back to my machine, I had already cut the little adhesive off the front of the tape. And I'm like, so which one is virgin and which one is recorded? And of course, they're ready to go again. And I put it on and fast forwarded. And I'm thinking, well, no, I don't hear anything. Yeah, that's okay. This must be the one, right? But in any case, because I hadn't really dropped any balls, I hadn't thrown any marbles, anything like that, I went talked to the director, the first AD, the script supervisor. It was imperative that they catch that actor before the second AD signed him off. Because once they sign him off and they bring him back, that's another day. And so the AD said, just tell him it was a technical problem. Nothing wrong with his performance. They didn't say it was a sound problem. That's when you know you're not working with a friend. He said it was a technical issue. Just bring it back, Came back, he did his thing again, and so that's why it's imperative that you give everybody their respect. You do everything professionally. And if you do make the mistake, throw yourself at the mercy. Don't try to hide it because, oh, I don't say anything. Well, they're going to see it in dailies. And I said, what happened to take 3? Well, I don't know. What do you mean, what happened to take 3? Hey, take 3 is not there. What happened to take 3? So that's why you have to be as perfect as possible. But if something goes wrong, then just be professional about it. Be a grown-up.
Yeah. Owning up to it is something that everyone can appreciate and respect, because even if it's wrong, at least we know you're the type of person that will just say, hey, I messed up, and then boom, we just move forward. So man, guys, this is 8:36 Eastern, 5:36 your time. Thank you so much for your extended time. So many nuggets. I know I'm gonna watch this recording again. But I do want to be respectful of your time. And I mean, honestly, I feel like we just drinking some lemonade out on the porch talking. But if you could just let us know, how can people find you on social media or see some of your work? Obviously, I know, Marlowe, you're currently working on Fear of the Walking Dead.
Yeah, currently I'm on Fear of the Walking Dead season 7. Really exciting, and then after this 6 months or so, I'll be back home. But right now, if you want to send me a message, I'm MT, so just my letter Marlowe Taylor, basically. So MT Sound Mixer, and that's on Instagram or on Twitter, which you're still on Twitter, which I'm on Twitter a little bit, but that's I think that's Molly T, which is MAULYT. And of course, if you're a Facebooker, and which is absolutely fine, a messenger, it's just Marlowe with a Molly T in the middle, Taylor. And Molly T is only because I did a lot of recording of acts and Snoop Dogg and Bone Thugs and Harmony and Fat Joe and a lot of that Chuck D. I've done a couple records with Chuck D, So that's the producing side of me. So if you just want to talk studio engineering and mics and Neumann and need 1073 EQs and stuff, nerdy stuff like that, we can do that too. I still have my studio with 2-inch machine and blah, blah. So that's Marlowe Molly T Taylor on Facebook. Right? And also my email, my website is it's rollsound76.com. So that's ROLL sound, SOUND, the number 76.com. So and my email to that is just Marlowe at rollsound76.com. MARLOWE.
My Instagram is in the chat. And I'm an old fool, so I know most of your questions are going to go to Marlowe because he's right there in the mix of today's world. But if you want to talk to an old fool, call me. Send me a message.
You want to talk to Uncle Russ? I can tell you right now, you want to talk to Uncle Russ.
Right.
That's all I can tell you. So he can try to downplay and call himself old school, but no, man, don't let him trick you. That pebble, don't get hit in the head with that pebble,
Right.
All right. Let's keep it
100%.
Right on. Thank you so much, Kevin, for this, and thank you guys. It's such a pleasure.
Thank you, Kevin. Much appreciated.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you, Russell. I appreciate you obviously giving us these nuggets of wisdom from your decades of experience, Marlowe. Man, just giving us I know the way that, and we had talked about how we're going to do this, and Russell was kind of talking about, old school, new school. But seriously, Marlowe, just the work that you've done, Queen and Slim, Judas and the Black Messiah, like these are our stories. And again, because 50% of film is sound, and when the sound is good, we don't think about it. So these great stories that are being told, you're right there recording them, and then able to tell us about hilarious whistles behind the scenes. So thank you, Marlowe and Russell. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you guys.
All right, everybody. So
and thanks for the great question.
Yes, indeed. Yes. Thank you, everybody. And let me tell you, I know, guys, you can still hear me right now, but I mean, I have never seen. We went to 8:40, and everyone is still on, whether they're on Facebook or they are on live with Crowdcast. Everybody stayed on. So the nuggets you guys shared obviously made a big difference. Ladies and gentlemen, the DC Black Film Festival is still going on right now. We have tons of incredible films that I would love for you all to check out. Go to dcbff.org for details as how you can watch these incredible films. We still got panel events tomorrow starting at 1 p.m. right back here. We'll be doing a women's empowerment panel in which we are going to be talking about how we can empower women in front of and behind the camera. At 3 p.m., we'll be bridging the gap with film critics. So if you want to know, what do film critics look for in films? How can you reach out to them? Please come back at 3 p.m. tomorrow for that. And then we'll have our award ceremony at 5 o'clock. So again, dcbff.org for more information and how you can see some of these films. Otherwise, man, Russell Williams, Marlowe Taylor, thank you so much for joining us today. It was incredible. We'll see you guys tomorrow.